Soul Calibur II was a success, owing a lot of it towards its Konsususu guest characters and its rock-solid gameplay that's still fun today. About a year later, Tekken 5 released in arcades and on the PlayStation 2, putting its own series back on track after Tekken 4 nearly destroyed its credibility. Namco had another hit on their hands, and they had to follow it up with another Soul game to put all others to shame. Unfortunately, they couldn't repeat the same strategies for Soul Calibur 2, as guest characters were too expensive, and running a big ambitious fighting game on 3 different platforms probably wasn't the best either. So it was decided that Soul Calibur III would be a PlayStation 2 exclusive and dropped almost out of nowhere in October 2005. For real, I don't recall any sort of advertisement for this game at all during this time. The only reason I knew it existed was that I had a friend who was a big Soul Calibur fan and got it at launch. I recall spending the night at his place one time, and we stayed up all night taking turns playing through all the various single-player modes it had to offer. I legitimately enjoyed my time with Soul Calibur 3 as a kid, but I haven't played through everything since then due to lack of time or interest. But I've made it this far in retrospective, and I'm curious if my opinions on this game will change. So to anybody who cares,
I was just wondering if you wanted to hang out with me and smoke weed and fill our bellies with diet soda and play
Soul Calibur III
for the PS2.
Fortunately, you don't have to clear anything to unlock any character biographies this time, which means the summary would be much cleaner than before. The rival battle in Soul Calibur 2 between Nightmare and Raphael is completely canon, as the disgraced former noble challenged the cursed knight for possession of Soul Edge. Nightmare kicked his ass, but Raph pierced the eye of Soul Edge before losing consciousness, inadvertently freeing Siegfried from the sword's control. Shedding himself from the cursed armor, he grabbed the nearest sword he could find, the Spirit Sword Soul Calibur, and rammed it into Soul Edge in a desperate attempt to destroy it. Knowing this is not enough to destroy it, Siegfried goes on a journey while holding on to his guilt over murdering countless people over the last few years to find a new answer. While Soul Edge wasn't completely destroyed, its spirit was transferred to Nightmare's armor, but was completely powerless. But a man with a scythe appears and conjures up a new body for Soul Edge from the armor. Think Alphonse Elric, except a homicidal mass murderer. So we're spared the chopper. But who is this mysterious person? Why would they revive Nightmare? This is Zasalamel, the sole survivor of the clan meant to guard Soul Calibur hundreds of years ago. He was exiled for holding the blade and was forced to find the ultimate means of survival: reincarnation. Unfortunately, this means he's cursed to sort of live for all eternity through countless different lives, with no real way to die for good. This would drive anybody else insane, but Zassy found a way. At one point in history, he held aloft Soul Edge, which was the closest he felt to dying for good, but it wasn't enough. So he decides to obtain both it and Soul Calibur when the latter shows up after being hidden for so long. Fortunately, the recent spat into Stringsburg Castle gave him the opportunity he was looking for, but both swords were depleted of their power. So Zasalamel gave Soul Edge a new body to go on a killing spree as Nightmare, and also attracts everyone involved with Soul Edge to flock towards Siegfried, as he's the one guy that currently has both swords. And to make doubly sure his plan doesn't fail, he personally visits specific warriors who could pose a threat and get rid of them. And that's the setup for Soul Calibur III. Almost everyone across the other titles returned from this game in some form or another. A whopping 18 characters to start out with, 7 more unlockables, and a buttload of extra palette swaps you can get as well. These include Li Long, who hasn't been playable since Soul Blade, Arthur, who had replaced Mitsurugi in the Korean version of Soul Calibur, and even the 3 shopkeepers that sell you stuff in this game want to smoke. I'll briefly cover the newcomers, save for Zasalamel, who I've talked about already. First up is Tira, the one chick you're convinced that you can fix, but her crazy outpaces your insanity for thinking such. She's the not-so-humble servant of the new Nightmare, tasked with destroying Soul Calibur and finding a new vessel for Soul Edge. Her first thought is to kidnap the children of Sophidia, but I doubt that'll come into play. Next is Setsuka, a lady in a kimono who seeks revenge on Mitsurugi for fatally wounding her master until he succumbed to his injury years later. She figures he's after Soul Edge, I mean, when is he not, right? And aims to track down Nightmare to get to Mitsurugi. There's also this strange buff owlman named Owlodon, who functions similarly to Edgemaster and Charade, but this dude gives off massive himbo energy. It's also worth mentioning that that's not a mask like how Rock wears elephant pelts or King with the Jaguar mask. No, he has a real owl beak with human pectorals and giant bird feet. I'd say this was strange, but this is the series that has demon ogres, backwards crawling gimps, lizard people, and a sword that corrupts people like the One Ring of Power. Wait, Does that mean Cervantes is like the Gollum of the series? I wonder if anyone but me drew that comparison. Anyway, going on to the general gameplay, it's all the same as it was in Soul Calibur 2. I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Some of the moves have changed since last time, but there's really not much new to discuss on this front. Visually, the game looks great for a late PS2 title. All the characters got upgraded models and better fits than before, including my all-time favorite Keelet costume. Love this one. The game runs fairly well, though it's not as consistent as the last two entries were. I noticed a bit of stuttering here and there, but it does run smoothly for the most part. The sound is on par with the last game, though apparently the sound was supported by THX, the same sound company behind Star Wars and various Pixar movies. I don't have the kind of ear to notice what that enhanced, but it still sounds great from the music, sound effects, and even the voice acting. The English dub was recasted and they turned in much better performances this time. A lot of these actors returned up to the latest game, Soul Calibur 6, so it's cool that they kept it consistent for so long. But if we're talking lack of consistency, wait till we get to all the single player content, because boy howdy, there's a lot. You no longer play through an arcade mode to unlock character endings in this game. Rather, the main story beats are told in a new mode called Tales of Souls, which sounds like the title of a Tales of game. Not only are there prologue text scrolls at the beginning to fill you in on where your character currently stands, but it also behaves like Edgemaster mode from Soul Blade, where you take on specific battles while getting extra lore in between. However, there are points where you're given a choice, and different choices takes you to different battles, which can make one playthrough radically different than others. There are also times when a button prompt flashes on screen, and pressing it on time makes you dodge or block incoming sneak attacks from NPCs. But screwing it up can take away a big chunk of your life in the ensuing battle, or even change the route in a current playthrough. Sometimes you'll get a prompt telling you that you're being watched, and you can either ignore it and move on, or stay and fight them. Depending on the stage this happens on, you'll fight an extra character that's tougher than most, and you only get one chance to beat them. There are also good and bad endings depending if you get the button prompt or not, and are all animated using in-game assets. It's like how Soul Blade handled its arcade endings, but at least here you get a QTE on screen rather than nothing. Tales of Souls is a mode where you'll probably be spending the most time on, as it's how you unlock secret characters, modes, weapons, and all the various cutscenes unlocked from choosing different routes for every character. A single run can take as little as 20 minutes, but longer if you're not up to snuff with some of these battles. Soul Calibur 3, more than any other game in the series so far, has the worst case of input reading AI and difficulty spikes. There will be one or two battles you may be stuck on because the computer decided to be an asshole on that specific stage. Fighting Mitsurugi in this game has always been a miserable ordeal for me, and that hasn't changed almost 20 years later. I also got stuck on Yoshimitsu of all people for a while because of the unfair input reading shenanigans. Once you reach the Lost Cathedral stage, you fight a rival, mostly Raphael, and a cage tries to drop on you.
Dang it!
Afterwards, you fight either Siegfried or Nightmare, depending on who won the ensuing battle. Take a guess, it's usually the one wearing the Player 2 outfit. Afterwards, one of two events trigger. 99% of the time, Zaslomel appears, only to have both swords transform him into Abyss, a weird skeleton monstrosity that reminds me of Skullmageddon from Double Dragon Neon. He could be annoying to fight against, but at least it's not Inferno for the millionth fucking time in a row. As for that magical 1%, which only happens if you navigate a specific story route and not lose even once, the final boss becomes Night Terror. This is what happens if Soul Edge regains its full power, and I've never gotten this thing because of the harsh stipulations. Ain't no way I'm losing once with this AI fighting against me, but at least you get to see what it looks like in Nightmare's ending. You're encouraged heavily to unlock special weapons from the store to make things a lot easier, but they aren't all available right away. Being able to buy certain weapons requires you to beat specific stages in a character's Tales of Souls, and sometimes you have to clear it multiple times just to get their Soul Calibur or Soul Edge variants. Clearing a run earns you a ton of gold you can use to buy shit from the store, which thankfully is much better organized than it was in the last game. It's divided into 3 shops, one for the weapons with different effects tied to them, there's the item shop where you can buy promotional content among other things, and then there's the armory where you can get equipable items for the new Create a Soul mode. You can do 2 things in this new mode. The first is a boring color customization option for main cast, that's whatever. The second one is far more interesting. For the first time in the series, you can create your own custom characters to use in battles. Between the gender, several fighting styles, and a bunch of clothing and hair options, you can make whatever you like. The options are rather limited when it comes to colors and clothing, but it is cool to see them expand the customization idea introduced in Tekken 5. All the custom character movesets are based on what class you chose, and are loosely based on existing characters with noticeable differences. They feel less complete in comparison, but it's still cool to try them all out. And these creative souls are mandatory for the new secondary story mode, Chronicles of the Sword. The plot is its own standalone story where 3 nations are at war with each other, and you, as the main character, are an up-and-coming commander for the Grandal army. The gameplay is vastly different than what we've seen in the series so far. It's a real-time strategy game where you command troops to take over enemy forts and defeat their forces. You command where they go on the map, and they automatically deplete the health of fortresses or enemy troops. To speed up the process and possibly guarantee victory, you can choose to engage the battle yourself using the fighting commands from the base game. If you lose a guy, they will respawn on the nearest ally base in a short amount of time, but losing all of your units fails the mission. Chronicles end if you seize all the important enemy landmarks, or if you lose all your troops or bases. It's an interesting side game that reminds me of Fire Emblem, except without all the turn-based mechanics. I made the hero team with limited imagination. It's just me and my friends taking on the world with janky movesets and gusto. Shouts to Nero the hero. Chronicles of the Sword was his jam back in the day, so I felt it was necessary for him to dominate this mode. Chronicles of the Sword is neat, but it is pretty lengthy from my understanding, so I didn't get super far into it. There's also a proper tutorial mode where Aladon shows you the ropes on every mechanic in the game. There's a glossary giving you vital info on all the fighting game lingo, a tournament that you can enter to win gold, a mission mode that has you battle in all sorts of weird scenarios, and a quick match that functions similar to arcade modes of the past, but with no story elements whatsoever. There's a lot to do and so much content to unlock between all the unlockable characters in the base roster, the extras and the custom characters, be it weapons, equipment, gallery pieces, or other modes. Soul Calibur III is a girthy fighting game in terms of its content, but the gameplay may turn you off if you're more of a casual fan. It can be incredibly challenging with the aforementioned difficulty curve and the sporadic computer opponents, but it is a worthy challenge to those who seek it. This is the hardest game in the series yet, but it's still rather fun to play despite the core gameplay not changing much. Overall, this is a good fighter for the PS2, albeit a frustrating one at points, but there is a lot of merit to it. But the high difficulty and vast amounts of stuff to unlock can turn some people off, and the infamous save bug may be a deal breaker as well. Yes, Soul Calibur 3 has a fatal bug where interrupting the save status irreparably corrupts your save file, and you'd have no choice but to start from scratch. I've had that happen once before, and it was heartbreaking. Learn from my mistake. Always save frequently, and never play this game on rainy days. Soul Calibur 3 reviewed fairly well, but it did significantly less favorably than the last game. I assume being locked on one console rather than being on all 3 was a factor, but I can't find evidence to support this. I also can't find any sales figures, though I can conclude it sold well enough for Namco to not stop making new games. That would be until 2007 with Soul Calibur Legends on Nintendo Wii passing like a fart in the wind, and Soul Calibur 4 on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 the following year. Tune in next time, and we'll be covering Soul Calibur 4, though I may save Legends for another time. Until then, thank y'all for watching, and have an awesome day.
You win. Will I ever be saved? The legend will never die.